Hi, I'm Rachel Lancaster, and this is the Magnificent Midlife podcast. This is where we celebrate women in midlife and beyond. We challenge the status quo and bash those negative stereotypes about being an older woman. We're not over the hill at 40, 50, 60. We're just getting started, and the world needs us now more than ever. I'll be talking all things midlife, about issues that matter, and sharing fabulous stories of amazing women doing very cool stuff. Now's our time. I've been a fan of today's guest for quite some time. Maryon Stewart is known as the pioneer of the natural menopause movement. She created a non-drug but scientifically based program to overcome issues associated with menopause, and she has helped thousands of women. She's written 29 self-help books, and she's also a campaigner for education around drugs. Maryon, it's so lovely to have you here today. Thank you.
It's great to be here too. I just have to correct you. I've written my 28th book just came out. I'm still figuring out what the 29th will be, but
Well, I'm sure I got it from a website somewhere. Oh dear. All right, 28 books. It's still quite a lot though, isn't it? It's quite a lot.
Yes, I think.
So let's start off. What does it mean to you to manage one's menopause naturally?
Well, it's managing without drugs and hormones, and it's doing what Mother Nature intended us to do. And the reason I'm doing this is I actually stumbled upon it accidentally. Many years ago, we started helping women with PMS based on 200 medical papers that are being published. And we helped, in fact, it turned out that we were helping 94% of women be symptom-free within the space of 4 months. And then in the early 90s, there were publications on menopause in the British Medical Journal and the Lancet on the natural approach to menopause. And so we tweaked our PMS program and turned it into a menopause program. And gradually over time, there's been literally thousands of medical papers supporting the natural approach, various aspects of it. And so it's become more and more effective over time. So back in the day, when I was seeing patients on a one-to-one and I had my clinic in Harley Street in London, I used to we had a team of about 13 nutritionists and doctors and nurses, and 91% of the women were symptom-free within 5 months. And then I got into a situation where a few years ago I made 4 little films on my phone for Facebook Live. Had absolutely no idea, but over 1 million women saw those films in the space of 12 weeks. And it was interesting because you mentioned that I was a drug campaigner, and my youngest daughter was given a legal high and tragically she passed away. So I was actually out of the health field for 6 years campaigning, actually, and we did change the law. But when I came back, I hadn't done social media, so I was starting all over again. And I didn't have my TV show anymore, and I didn't have my columns, and I didn't really know what to do. By that time, I'd married an American man, so I was spending some time in America as well, and I didn't have a network. So I was thinking, so I asked a friend of mine if she could introduce me to a filmmaker, because I'd made lots of films for the foundation I ran, and I'm used to telling stories through film. So she introduced me to someone who was running this Facebook Live course the next day, and that's how come I did it. And then I realized that I can't just go on helping people on a one-to-one. I've got to try and get organized and use all the science that we use in the 5-month program and turn it into a 6-week, just bite-sized chunks. So over 6 weeks to teach women about how to manage naturally and take all the guesswork out of it, and take when you go to what I call Dr. Google, it's so variable what you're going to get. And if you've been up all night and you've got brain fog and you're feeling anxious anyway, then you're not really going to have a clue what to reach for. And sometimes even the pills on the shelves in the high street don't contain what they say on the label. So the whole thing is very, very tricky. And so my mission is to help women to understand how they can manage their menopause naturally and really reclaim their well-being, be the best version of themselves, and make longevity a wonderful experience, as opposed to feeling like it's the end of life as they knew it.
Yay!
Sorry, that's a long answer.
No, I love it. And there's so much information in the book. It really is. There's just everything in there that you would need to know, which is wonderful. But why is it important to you that women can do this naturally?
Well, in our last survey on 1,100 women, we found that 37% of them had been given antidepressants, and over 80% of them didn't feel that was appropriate because they didn't have clinical depression. And 41% were given hormone replacement therapy. 14% didn't take it because they were too scared of the side effects. And 61% of the women who did take it came off because of adverse side effects. And there was a Mayo Clinic survey on doctors and gynecologists that was published in 2019 showing that only 7% of doctors and gynecologists feel adequately educated to help women going through the menopause. So I know from all the years I've been doing this on PMS and menopause that doctors very sadly are not educated. They don't learn about the natural approach to much, and they're certainly not armed with all the tools or familiar with the literature. And because I see women going from feeling as bad as suicidal, and certainly leaving the workplace, feeling they can't function anymore, dysfunctional relationships because they can't bear to be touched or they've got no libido, and I see them transform. I would have said to you a few years ago within 5 months, but now I can put my hand on my heart and say even in 6 weeks of the course, which blew me away, these women see a massive light at the end of the tunnel, and they really do get back to feeling better than they can remember. And so it's compelling, and I feel it's unjust that women don't have the tools and the information, the knowledge and the support to help them get through this transition, because it is only a transition, and you can come out the other end of it feeling turbocharged if you know how to meet your needs, if you have what I call a midlife refuel, and that's all you need to do. And so I've tried to outline that in the book. So the book has turned out to, I didn't really mean to write this book, but I just felt that because I had written other books on menopause, but I just wanted to write this as it's effectively the manual for my 6-week course. Plus, there's a part of it that teaches women how to manage after menopause, because your symptoms aren't magically going to go away because you've got no estrogen and low levels of nutrients. And so I see women in their 70s who are still suffering. And because we weren't living more than to 50, 100 years or so ago, but now when 40 something represents halfway for so many of us, we need to not just overcome our symptoms, we've got to future-proof our health so that we're not sitting ducks and more prone to things like heart disease and osteoporosis and dementia, because all of those things can be prevented. And it's just beyond sad that women don't have the knowledge.
But there are many people out there who will say that, HRT can fix the problems for menopause, and it can look after your heart health, and it can look after your bones. So I'll just tell you my little story, because I know that your approach works, because I also personally experienced it when I went, part of it. I went through early menopause at 41, and I was able to reverse that diagnosis through diet and lifestyle changes. So I realized very early on, that was 13 years ago, but I realized that we can have so much more impact over our health. But even then, I was advised to take the HRT because particularly of my heart and my bones. So why do you think it's still better for us to, why not just have the HRT because it can do everything and it can protect our bones and heart, supposedly? I don't know. I struggle with that. Personally, I don't know whether it's fact or fiction and what evidence there is, but I'd be very interested to know your thoughts on that.
Okay, I've got various thoughts on that. I don't think HRT was regarded by the majority of the medical profession as a treatment for life. And also, if you take HRT, it doesn't correct your nutritional deficiencies. And I know we haven't talked about that yet, but we need to talk about that because the research shows that billions of women have got nutritional deficiencies, and that affects your brain chemistry and your hormone function. So it's only going to do part of the job, and there's no reason why someone can't take HRT and come on our program and have the midlife refuel. However, what we do as well is we teach women, and there's plenty of medical evidence to support this, we teach women how to consume naturally occurring estrogen. So when you look under the microscope at estradiol, which is the estrogen that you had before menopause, and Mother Nature's estrogen, the phytoestrogens, they look almost identical. It's a bit like spot the difference. They're not the same, but they look so similar that you can fool the brain into thinking you've got normal circulating estrogen. And so therefore, the brain doesn't think you've got empty estrogen receptor sites, and it stops trying to kickstart your ovaries back into function, and your symptoms like hot flushes and night sweats disappear. So some people come to me because they want to wean off HRT, and it's really important, I'd say to anyone taking HRT, if you want to come off it, do not come off it suddenly, because you can get really aggressive symptoms. So what we tend to do, in conjunction with the person's doctor, we wean them off the HRT gradually. And what we're essentially doing, if you had, let's say, an egg and spoon race, and in one lane you had HRT, in one lane you had Mother Nature's estrogen, and in the next lane you had the harmful environmental estrogens, which come from pollution and pesticides and plastics and so on. Mother Nature's estrogen would win the race, jump into the receptor site, seal off the space. And so what we're effectively doing is satisfying the receptor site and actually making the HRT redundant. So when we wean the women off the HRT, they don't have any symptoms and they don't notice that the HRT is going. And that's really how it works. And so it is an alternative for those women who want to take it. And again, in our last survey, we found that 90% of the women said that they wanted information about how to manage their menopause naturally. So it is, I don't think women really, I mean, obviously some women do want to take a magic pill and regard HRT as that. But if you remember, I said in our survey that 61% of the women who took HRT said they came off it because of adverse side effects. And some women can't take it. You know, if you've got breast cancer in your family, or if you suffer with migraine or clots in your blood, then you really are not a candidate for HRT. So there has to, and if you've had breast cancer. So, you know, there's got to be a good alternative. And this is it. I've been doing it for 28 years, and I regularly see miraculous transformations. And women feel that they've just got their lives back. One of the women I talk about in the book, because there's lots of women sharing their stories in the book, one of them is Professor Jo Brewis, who was the co-author, one of the co-authors of the Government in the Workplace review on menopause, which came out in 2017. And I met her at a conference, and she was afraid because her parents had had early Alzheimer's and she couldn't string a sentence together or even remember her colleagues' names, that she was going down the same path. And she had other symptoms. She was feeling tired, and obviously it affected her mood. It made her fearful. And she had spots on her face for the first time and an upset tummy. And I said, come on our course and just see what happens. And within the space of a few months, her symptoms had gone completely. And she described, we made a film with her last year, and she described herself with a big smile on her face as practically a new woman. And instead of leaving the workplace, she was made head of department at her university. So we see there's other women in the book, you know, a midwife who had what she was told was a mental breakdown. She was curled up in a ball at home. She was signed off work. She's now back at work and leading a whole team of midwives, delivering babies and having a fantastic time. And had 2 little grandchildren in the meantime, 2 babies, and is able to get down on the floor and play with them and really enjoy her life on all those levels. And so I see this going on, and I feel passionately that everyone has a right to this information. We can't be expected, we're the fastest growing sector in the workplace. We cannot be expected to carry on performing when we're running on empty.
And that's what we do, isn't it? We get to midlife. So many women get to midlife and we're running on empty. So you've talked about the need for a midlife refuel. So what does that mean?
Well, in the early days when we were dealing with women with PMS, and there was no help for women out there. There were waiting lists of 6 months and women who were suicidal. So when I came across these 200 medical papers, and I was married to a doctor at the time, I trained his nurse how to use these medical papers, and we started helping women with PMS. And in the course of doing that, because it was such a new thing in those days, we had literally, sometimes we'd get over, it was before emails, we got over 2,000 letters a day from women all over the country because the media got to hear about what we were doing. And so we had this massive data pool. And in the 5 studies we eventually did, some of them our own patients, some of them hospital patients, some family planning clinic patients. We did a study in a psychiatric daycare centre and one at Kimberley-Clark in the workplace. And we found that between 50 to 80% of the women had low levels of magnesium, B vitamins, iron, zinc, essential fatty acids, calcium, vitamin D. And those nutrients were affecting brain chemistry and hormone function, so that women literally were firing on 2 cylinders instead of 4. And it literally does change the color of the lenses through which you see the world. So people get depressed, they get tired, they get achy, feel 90 before their time. And all of these things are because they're running on empty. So when we've had babies and done some breastfeeding and maybe lived life in the fast lane and drunk a bit too much alcohol and got to midlife, our nutrients are in our boots and we can't function properly. And so it's a question of learning how to meet your needs. So in the book, I focused on the physical signs of vitamin and mineral deficiency because Mother Nature in her wisdom shows us signs in our skin, hair and nails. So for example, if you get cracking at the corners of your mouth or red patches at the side of your nose, dry skin, greasy skin, split, brittle hair, dull hair, falling out hair, your nails are dry and crispy and they're breaking or ridged, all of those things, pimples on your upper arms and thighs, I can just go on and on. There are so many signs, but we never learn about them. So we're born as babies with millions of eggs. We have no roadmap. We have no manual. No one teaches us how to deal with anything. And then we get to this ghastly mess at midlife. And our surveys on thousands and thousands of women show us that women feel that this is the end of life as they knew it. And it's a terrible situation. It makes for mental illness and depression. It isn't mental illness and depression. It's just they're running on empty. And so when we give them this refuel, it has an amazing effect. And it just wakes them up again. The brain chemistry starts working normally. It's like the conductor in an orchestra conducting with both arms instead of one tied behind his back. You know, it's just different.
So what are the most common issues that women present with when they come and talk to you?
I think when they get to me, I'm usually their last resort because they've tried so many things. And I describe my program as a pie. So it's got all these different segments. It's not a magic pill. You need to have a taste of each bit to get the benefits. So I had someone on, because everything I do now is virtual. So I had a call this morning, a Zoom call with someone who's suicidal, and that's not uncommon. Other women who feel that they've got early onset Alzheimer's or dementia, people who are having panic attacks and palpitations, some of them who have been admitted to hospital even thinking they're having a heart attack. And it turned out that it was just associated with their menopause. Certainly people who are achy and obviously having terrible hot flushes and night sweats. I'd say low libido was probably the next thing, although they don't normally just come for that because they don't know that they can reverse that. And our relationship survey on over 800 women showed that 70% of women feel switched off below the waist at midlife, and over 50% of them have got vaginal dryness, so sex becomes really painful. And that's probably the best kept secret in the whole world because they don't even talk to their best friends about it. It's so awful. And we've surveyed men, and men feel scared and frustrated and rejected and just don't know where to begin to have the conversation. And the women don't want to talk about it really either because they're afraid they're opening a can of worms, and maybe when their partner knows the real situation with their body and how they really feel, might go off and choose someone else.
So let's start with low libido and dry vaginas. Why not? Let's dive on in there. So what's your advice for low libido and dry vagina, other than finding a new partner and having an exciting time with somebody else?
Well, I don't think that would really work, to be honest. If you have got a dry vagina and it's all split and sometimes bleeding, having a new partner might be the worst nightmare on the planet because it's just going to make you feel worse, and not to mention what it's going to do to your self-esteem. So let's take this bit by bit. First of all, I encourage women to sort out their vaginal tissues first before they think about libido. Sometimes libido comes back automatically because don't forget, when you're in what I call economy mode and you've got low levels of all these nutrients, you are firing on 2 cylinders instead of 4, and therefore things like sense of humor, energy, and libido are all luxury commodities.
Yes, they all go out the window, don't they?
Yeah. So sometimes when you have this refuel, your libido comes back all by itself, and we don't need to do anything about it. But we do need to do some work to get the tissues under control in the vagina. Now, the first paper I ever read on the natural approach to menopause was a study that was done at Monash University in Australia, where this was in 1990, they gave women red clover, soy, and flax seeds, and they found they were able to bring about a similar change in the lining of the vagina as they would expect to see in women taking HRT. Obviously, that made me sit up and think, but certainly when you take in naturally occurring estrogen, because you're filling the receptor sites, the factory in your body that was making those wonderful mucus cells and the elasticity in the tissues goes back into production. So we do it with diet, and we also use, in the UK, we use omega-7, which is a seed buckthorn product that has been through clinical trials and shows that it helps to restore the environment in the vagina. So we use that as well. And for the majority of women, that works. And there are some creams that you can use as well. And we tend to use those. I talk about them in the book. And in chapter 4 of the book, I talk about supplements as well, because it's not just about diet. It's about taking some supplements that have been through clinical trials for your own particular symptom set, and choosing the ones that are standardized, that do contain what they say on the label, and that have been shown to be safe and effective. And that's definitely not every supplement. I know you were on that Clubhouse session with me last night. You may have heard me say that we were asked to recommend a supplement that contained isoflavones, these naturally occurring estrogens. I won't mention the name. In fact, I don't even know if it exists anymore. It shouldn't, because they claimed it contained 39 milligrams of isoflavones, but actually an independent analysis showed that it contained 1 milligram. And so I get very angry when women go and make purchases and they're being duped into thinking it's going to be a solution when it really isn't. And that's why I felt even more compelled to mention supplements by name. They come from all over the world, and they have been through clinical trials. And it's important that women know the difference between those and things that just may not be that helpful. In fact, they're a waste of money.
Yeah. And it's really difficult because it then gives the whole natural menopause field a bad name, doesn't it? Because people will they'll latch onto that. So, for example, people who are more keen on the HRT route will latch onto the fact, well, this isn't scientifically proven and that doesn't work, or has been shown to be, not what it says it is. So, yeah, it's very frustrating.
But also, if you are familiar with the literature, and you have, you're a specialist in your area, you should have read everything. So you should have read the fact that there are some things that have been through good science. And equally with bioidentical hormones, and I'm not criticizing hormones for a second, but some bioidentical hormones were actually banned by the FDA in America, as they said that they were dangerous. So there are some better products in the HRT basket and some not so good products. So it's just familiarizing yourself with what's good and what isn't.
Absolutely. Sadly, there aren't too many people who are able to have all of that information, but that's why, having your book is so wonderful from the natural perspective, to have it all laid out there. It is a really good book. I would recommend it. Go and read it, people.
Thank you.
I would really recommend it. So I guess probably is low libido and vaginal dryness, is that probably the most embarrassing or shame-filled thing that people present with when they come to see you? Or is there anything else that really makes it very hard for women?
I think it's probably the most embarrassing, but it may not be the thing that's preoccupying them the most. I think when they've got brain fog, and when they are so anxious and they've got insomnia and they're not functioning, the last thing on their mind is sex. They can't even see that they can live well, let alone have a physical relationship. I think underneath it all, a lot of them are scared stiff that that's the end of their sex life and intimacy, and that heaven knows what's going to happen with their partner, and it kind of alienates them from their partner. So in my experience, certainly when I used to have my one-to-one clinics, I encouraged partners to come together, and so that when a partner helps someone going through menopause, it makes a big difference when they actually understand. Because sometimes you just need a hug, you need a massage, and you need somebody to bring you a bunch of flowers and tell you it's going to be okay. And it is going to be okay if you have got the roadmap and you know how to get yourself back into good shape again. It doesn't take very long. It's a few months, and you'll see a massive light at the end of the tunnel. And probably because we go downhill so slowly as women, because we're bottom of our own priority list, we don't realize how far down we've gone until we come up again. And so therefore women say, I remember Sherry Lungi, the actress, when she was a patient of mine years ago, she said she felt 500 times better. And I didn't pay her a penny to say that, but she did. She just felt, she couldn't remember when she was reading her script, she couldn't remember the script. And then she'd go bright red and be melting and, afraid that would be picked up on the camera. There's just so many tricky things for women. I had one woman who was CEO of a company, and when she had a hot flush, she used to pass out. Imagine how she felt in front of the men in her team.
Oh my goodness.
It was just awful. So, and obviously it's not, I'm telling you about extreme cases, but equally there are women who suffer mildly to moderately, and the book will be very good for them because it will just give them information and they don't need any hands-on help. The ones who are having a terrible time probably do need some extra help. And these days in January, we set up the Midlife Refuel Club on my website. So people can come and join the community. And we've put tons of self-help information in there, webinars and films and handouts and downloads and all that kind of thing. Plus I do a live session every week so people can come and join that and get their questions answered. And so I just want to make this information accessible to everybody so that it's just women helping women, isn't it, really? And I think there's a massive movement to do that so that we can, and this world is in quite a mess at the moment on many levels. And when women get to midlife, they've got a lot of wisdom and they need to be able to use that wisdom, put it to good use and help society, the planet, their family and themselves and their workplace rather than leaving the workplace. There was a survey done showing that 1 in 4 women are leaving the workplace. And we know that it's costing a fortune. Forbes said in 2019 that globally and annually, lost productivity associated with menopause is costing $810 billion. You can get your head around that. So most companies don't realize what's going on. And we did a survey on 1,000 women in the workplace in the UK and found that 84% of the women said that their productivity was affected adversely for more than 8 days a month. And we calculated that was about £5,500 per woman per year. And that didn't include lost talent. And it costs about £30,000 to replace a manager. So for a company to invest a small amount in their workforce, comparatively, they're going to get so much back. They'll have a loyal workforce that's well and productive, and it will help their bottom line. And I think in the absence of doctors being educated, that's really what's happening at the moment. We've partnered with Virgin Care, and we're looking at just demonstrating how you can take the symptom scores from high to nothing or low, and how you can boost productivity and have women. Also, it does wonders for your self-esteem, because as women, we've been competing in a male environment probably most of our working lives. We've seen massive changes in the equality stakes, and we don't want to spoil that at midlife and have men point the finger and say, well, look, she's got a desk fan now and she needs more flexible working hours, so let's give her an M badge, and I told you she wasn't equal, and now she's proving it. And that doesn't need to happen. Do you know, I feel almost like the suffragettes who chained themselves to the railings. Do you know, I feel we need to do something about this and change the whole paradigm so that instead of menopause being a scary thing that's filled with stigma, women just come to regard the fact that in their 40s, they're allowed and entitled to have a midlife refuel, which takes a few months, and then that's it. They get turbocharged and go off and can be, as they say in America, awesome.
Well, I like to say when we're done making babies, we're ready to make solutions.
Yes.
And we have such a role to play, I believe, as older women in the world. And being post-menopause for me has been a remarkable and incredible experience. You know, I really feel that power now. I do things now that I never would have done before. I'm a different person, and I like being a different person. So
yeah, no, I agree with you. And if you think about it, years ago, or not even years ago, probably even today, in some societies, older women are considered to be wise elders, and they're revered and respected. Whereas in our Western society, that's not the case at all. We become invisible. And in some cases, people try and avoid us because they think that we're quirky or ratty or whatever, how they perceive a menopausal woman. And that's terrible.
Yeah, it is terrible. It is terrible. I completely agree with you. So midlife, as we know, is a great time for us to sort out our diet, but there are so many different theories out there, it can be difficult to know what to do. So I'd love to know your thoughts on, how we can get a good diet, but also especially how best do you think we can balance fat and fiber?
I don't really emphasize balancing fat and fiber so much as having an enjoyable diet that's got all the different food groups in it. And so we focus on making the diet nutritionally dense, but also making it enjoyable, because it's not going to be sustainable in the long term if I'm asking people to eat things that they hate. And so we've got a system in the book where people can assess their nutrient levels, detect what they might be short of, and then there are lists of foods that are rich in important nutrients, and so they can choose the foods to put into their diet. And there's meal plans and recipes, shopping lists, there's absolutely everything, so that you don't even really have to think, you can just follow it, and you can keep it as simple as you like. It's important to have wholesome food for each meal and to get your nutrients back into an optimum range, which is where the wholesome food comes in, and maybe some supplements as well to give you a boost to start with in terms of your nutrients. And then also to consume Mother Nature's estrogen little and often, because the receptor sites don't stay full for that long. And so for example, we may have some cereal for breakfast with some fruit, nuts and seeds, particularly flax seeds, which are a rich source of naturally occurring estrogen. At lunchtime, you can keep it simple, maybe have a salad and some edamame beans, jacket potato, sushi, that kind of, there's just tons of options. And then in the evening, you don't even have to do anything fancy, but you can maybe have soy yogurt, or you can have, there's just loads of different things. If you hate cooking, you can do it all without really you can just do it with healthy fast food. And if you love cooking, then we've got some really nice meal plans and recipes and desserts you can whip up in a few seconds, that kind of thing. It can be really enjoyable. I remember once I had one of my books, which was Fighter Estrogen Rich Recipes, and we had a book launch at Mosiman's. Anton Mosiman did all the cooking, and honestly, the dishes looked amazing, and the journalists who came thought they had no clue that there was any funny food in there. They thought it was just delicious. Might look quite different to when I make it, but we're not asking people to eat tofu kebabs necessarily unless they want to.
And I know also that sometimes we get to midlife and there are certain foods that we can't tolerate as well as before, and bloat can be a real issue, can't it? How can we avoid bloat in midlife?
About 50% of the women that we see and in our surveys suffer with constipation at this life stage. Everything's slowing down in your body. When you've got low levels of magnesium, as we found was the most common deficiency, then the gut muscle doesn't work properly. And as a result, you get obviously the motion stagnating, and then you can get windy and bloated. Also, when you've got low levels of nutrients, the brain doesn't understand that certain foods and drinks are wholesome, and it can think they're toxic, and you can get an antibody reaction. So you can get fluid being dragged into your cells in an attempt to flush out the so-called toxins. So sometimes women on our program can actually pee out 7 pounds overnight when they change their diet, because they're not making these antibodies anymore. They haven't got the excess fluid. So it's really different for everybody, because we've all got a different history, we've all got different tastes, and our bodies work in different ways. So, which is why the book gives the people the opportunity to find the right kind of program for them, which is what we're effectively doing when people come to me and to our clinic. Then we help them to choose everything that's going to work for them. And even then, we don't always get it right first time. It's a process, a suck it and see process to see what works over time and what works at different phases. Because if you're going through perimenopause, you may need a certain regime, and then suddenly you hit the next phase in the journey and it may not be working quite so well, and you have to tweak it and look at some other tools. And the lovely thing is that there are so many tools. And so if one thing isn't really working, then we can find something else that is.
I think that's so important, isn't it? Because I think a lot of women, they discount the natural route because they say, oh, I tried that, it didn't work. Oh, and I tried that, it didn't work. But as you've said before, it's so many things, isn't it? And so many things to try and be curious about what's working and what isn't working, and tracking it as well to see, how well it's working.
Yes, but also you can't just take a pill for, 4 weeks and think that's going to be magic. Because for a start, the clinical trials last for more like 3 months. And it's not going to be one single thing that does it. It's really, I equate my program to the equivalent of a 5,000 mile service. You've got this far in your life, you're running on empty. It's like you come into the pit and you do need to be serviced and educated and nurtured and supported while you have the refuel, and then go out the other end feeling that you can get back onto the fast lane and do all the things you want to do in your life without being overwhelmed by symptoms.
I've got another embarrassing issue I'd love to ask you about, because I know you're comfortable talking about these things. So urinary tract infections, that's a really sexy topic for my podcast, but it is an issue in midlife. As we go through menopause, we can suffer from more of them. So why does that happen, and what can we do about it?
Well, and it's common, particularly after sex as well. People get, when they get brave enough to start having sex again, and then they find they get a UTI, then that's pretty rough. Okay, so what's going on is low levels of magnesium don't help, and nor do low levels of vitamin D. And everyone should be taking vitamin D at the moment anyway to help to boost their immunity because of COVID. But those two nutrients have certainly been found to be necessary for normal bladder function and can reduce the incidence of UTI. But also what's happening in those tissues is they're getting thin, like the tissues in the vagina. And so in the course of taking Mother Nature's estrogen into your regime, you're getting the factory lights back on again, and you're satisfying the needs of the receptor sites. So the brain thinks you've got normal circulating estrogen, and you make all those cells that kept the tissues in good shape. And the research even goes as far to show that you can reduce the depths of wrinkles on your face by consuming these things. So it has a very positive effect on your skin, hair, and nails, as well as the important little places. And so we find that not only do women not get recurrent infections, but they're also not waking up in the night peeing 7 times a night. They start sleeping through the night peacefully, and their body starts behaving as it should, as opposed to feeling like an old lady.
That's all brilliant. That's fantastic. I love that there are so many options, that things that we can do and try. And I think it's incredibly, as you said earlier, it's incredibly empowering for women if we can take back control of our own menopause experience, that we're not just sort of these helpless things going, oh, menopause is terrible, but actually we can reframe it and we can reposition it and we can take back our control, which is really good, I think.
Yeah, so if somebody invited you to go to a 5-star retreat to have, off somewhere exotic like India or whatever, to have a detox and all of that thing, you'd think, oh, that sounds amazing. I can have a break from my life. I can go and have a refuel. And so really, I want women to think about this phase in their life like that. I want them to think, I'm going to take a window now. Like people take a leave of absence from work. They can still go to work, but I'm going to take a window where I'm going to spend a few months nurturing myself, learning how to meet my needs for this next life stage. And so I can actually feel better than I remember, and know that that's possible. And if women go away from this broadcast knowing that that is possible, and they've got hope in their heart that they can feel better, then I think between us we'll have done a good job.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Magnificent Midlife podcast. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, share it, and leave me a review wherever you're listening. It really helps me get the message out. You can find out more information about this episode in the show notes at magnificentmidlife.com. That's also where you'll find strategies, support, and resources to help make your midlife magnificent. Get clarity on how to make the most of your next chapter. Help me change the world, one magnificent midlife woman at a time.